Bride of the Hollow Moon. Chapter 1. The night the river chose me. The river did not run with water that night, but with omen. We'd all come to the banks with lanterns cupped like second hearts in our hands, a procession of wheat-rough men and winter-eyed women and children with mouths already learning how to keep quiet. I wore my mother's shawl, the one that smelled of smoke and rosemary, and tried not to stare at the lilies drifting down the black current like floating candles. The elders said, if a lily turned and faced you, it was a blessing. The old song said, if a lily came to rest against your ankles, the hollow moon had found your name. I hummed one of those old songs under my breath, not to draw notice, but to pretend I had some say in it. The notes were a borrowed courage. My village, Darglan, had a way of making a person feel like a borrowed thing, too. You were born into a ledger of favors you didn't remember asking for. Your father's debt to the miller, your mother's promise to the whispers in the wood, your own unstated obligation to the river that once dragged a fever out of your body and into itself. And we didn't speak the debt aloud, because the debt had a king, and the king had a crown woven of void. I kept to the back of the gathering, with my lantern held low. Farther along the shore, a boy blew out his light, waiting to see if the lilies would veer toward him or pass him by. Someone knocked his shoulder and relit it for him. No one wished to be chosen. Not for this. Not for the Hollow King's tithe. Liora, Aunt Magda hissed, her eyes like fish hooks under her shawl's edge. Stand where I can see you. Yes, I said, and did not move. I had spent 19 years standing where other people could keep count of me. The bell in the little riverside chapel tolled once. The sound skittered over the water, a beetle on glass. From the opposite bank, dancers from the shade hollows began to sway, their bells whispering. They looked like people until you looked at their wrists and saw the thin cords of shadow that threaded them to the trees, like kite strings made of night. Not fey, our stories for the fey were sweeter, like fruit knives that cut only thin, polite slices. These were the king's second breaths, the lives he'd shaken loose from one body and poured into another. They smiled the way winter smiles, all teeth where the light should be. Remember, Aunt Magda breathed, we do not look into the river after moonrise. We don't ask questions. We take our blessings standing up. Blessings, I echoed, and tasted iron. Moonrise came like a held breath released. The hollow moon climbed pale and holed through, as if something had eaten it. The lilies turned, one by one, to face upstream, then downstream, then toward us. A ripple ran against the current, as if something large swam beneath it, peering upward with eyeless patience. Someone whispered a prayer to a saint whose name had been banned in my grandmother's day. Another voice, too young to be wise, whispered the king's name. The river made a sound that wasn't a sound at all, but the idea of one. It was like hearing your own footstep behind you. A lily drifted toward me, turned away, drifted back. It touched the hem of my dress, then slid on to kelp-silent ankles beside me. The girl there sobbed once, shook her head, and tried to shuffle closer to her mother. The lily skated on the small waves and settled again at my feet. Aunt Magda squeezed my elbow. Stand still. I stood. The lantern's heat licked my knuckles. I imagined dropping it into the dark and watching it sputter out. I imagined setting my shawl on fire and running until the forest swallowed the sparks. I was still imagining when the lily tipped, petals cupping water, brimming like a mouth about to speak. When it spilled a name. Not mine. At first, it spilled 1,000 church-silent syllables, The names of every woman who had bargained and bled and borne under the Hollow King's rule, as if the river wished to remind me I would not be alone in my fate. Then my name rose like a hook through the middle of all that history. Liora. It was not a voice that said it. It was gravity. It was the way the world leaned. Some of the villagers crossed themselves with their left hand, which meant a secret request to the old saints to keep their pity out of it. Others did not look at me at all. The boy with the relit lantern whispered, "I'm sorry," as if he'd done it. I wanted to tell him he hadn't, that this had been folding toward me for years like the wings of a great dark bird. Instead, I nodded as if to a neighbor and stepped closer to the water. "Wait," Aunt Magda said, but softly, as if the thought of waiting had already gone elsewhere. I knelt and touched the lily. My fingers came away cold and gleaming with the river's second skin. The dancers' bells hushed themselves, their cords tightened. The chapel bell tolled again. The ripple in the river stilled. I didn't know whether it was for respect or anticipation. "You will go," Aunt Magda said. Her jaw worked. "You will go brave. You will go with your head high, and if he offers you a gift, refuse it 3 times, I said. "I remember the old lines." "You remember the wrong ones. Refuse the first gift if it's beauty, the second if it's pity, and the third if it is a key." Aunt Magda stroked my hair with hands that smelled of nettle. "But if he offers you a knife, take it." "You think he will offer me a knife?" "I think men like kings always do," she said. I kissed her cheek and tasted salt that wasn't mine. The river had its own steps you had to climb down to be ferried across. They had been carved centuries ago by hands that no longer remembered how to craft anything that didn't take something from you in return. I went down them as if I were going to the market to fetch eggs. My lantern made a little circle of gold on the water, a coin no one would accept. I expected a boat. We always expect boats when stories like this arrive in our mouths. The last 3 tithes had been ferried by the silent men with ropes around their wrists. That's what the ledger of the village said, but the Hollow King keeps his accounts in different ink. The water gathered itself up, not into a vessel, but into a shape that suggested a vessel edges, a cradle, a wet breath that would hold me if I accepted the holding. I stepped into it and felt the river's cold come up through the soles of my feet. It was more intimate than any hand I'd ever grasped. The water didn't move. The world did. The banks slid away like scenery in a play when the actors need a different room. The chapel's bell shrank into a single floating tone. The dancers were the last to leave me. Their chords whispered through the leaves, and then the leaves themselves unknitted into a deeper dark. Ahead was a bridge of bones and night. It arced without touching the shore on either side, as if it began and ended in a place I couldn't see. I had heard of it, of course. The Hollow King's Bridge, spanning no river but every debt. The under things of the world crawled beneath it, carrying it on their backs, and the bones were not bones but promises that had hardened into architecture. Halfway across, the knot boat stopped. The river below the bridge looked like a sky turned upside down. Stars darted under the surface like silver fish. "Do I stand?" I asked. "Do I kneel?" "Neither," said a voice in front of me, and the knot boat rippled with the sound. "You fall, if you can help it. You fall beautifully." He had back to He stood where the knot boat suggested a prow might be. He had not been there a blink before. He was not what the tales had taught me to hate. He was taller than he had any right to be, yes, and his hair was the sort of black that isn't merely the absence of light, but the thing that eats it. There were antlers at his temples, not antlers exactly, but the idea of them, a geometry of shadow that cast no shade. His clothes were night's afterthought. His eyes were wrong only in this: they looked like mine when I hadn't slept too much truth around the edges. Hollow King, I said. Kael, he corrected. The name flexed like a wrist. Save your genuflections for men who never deserved them. You brought your own light. He meant the lantern. He reached to touch it, and the flame leaned toward his finger like a bird to a seed. When he tried to pinch it out, it climbed his knuckle and perched. The flame sat calmly on his skin and did not burn him. I watched both the light and his face, and told myself that one should not forgive the other. It seems to like me, he said, amused. It likes soft things, I said. It's a town lantern. Everyone it has ever warmed said thank you to it in their chest. The words were foolish, and worse than foolish, they were honest. I was tired of being wise. The night knows when you're tired and opens a door for that version of you. I went through. Kael looked down at the bridge of bone promises. You are Liora of Darglan. You cured a fever by swallowing snow and lying under a live oak until the tree forgot you. You dreamed 2 nights out of 7, and the other 5 you watch over a nephew who breathes like a rabbit trying not to be found. You want 5 contradictory things, and this makes you powerful. I want to go home, I said, and to stay away from it forever. Is that 2 of the 5? His mouth made the shape of a smile without committing to it. That's 1. You want to be loved without being possessed. You want to be anything but ordinary, and yet to be allowed the ordinary things in peace. You want to know if I can be killed. You want to know if you can do it. I did not flinch, because I did not have it in me to perform innocence. You left out wanting to eat warm bread with butter until I believe in gods again, I said. That is an ordinary thing, Kael said. And so, the holiest. He extended a hand. He wore a ring of black stone that looked like a hole punched through the world. Will you consent to cross? I do not take what is not given. I laughed. A small, miserable thing. You take it by arranging the hour and the lilies. Consent is a puppet here. His gaze moved not to my face but to my hands, where the river's second skin still shone. And yet, I ask, choose the refusal if it is yours. Behind him the bridge breathed, if bridges can be said to do that, and I thought of Aunt Magda's 3 refusals: beauty, pity, key. What is the gift you'd offer me now? I asked, because sometimes the only way to tell a story from telling you is in the asking. He tilted his head. The antler shadow moved like a thought, brushing a star into a different place. A name, he said. Not mine, yours. I have a name. You have a sound people make to fetch you, he said. A name is a knife and a shield. The right one lets you open certain doors and lock others forever. Then I refuse, I said. Not because I'm wise, because I'm stubborn. In a damned he looked pleased, disappointed, some expression that remembered the taste of both. Very well. He lowered his hand. Cross anyway. The bridge will keep you until we reach the court. You will see my house. You will see my enemies. They will ask you why I brought you. If you're wise, you'll say I am trying to undo the laws of my own making with a girl who can do 5 contradictory things. If you're honest, you'll say you don't know yet. Why did you bring me? I asked. To find out whether I am a man pretending to be a monster, he said. Or, the other thing, better. We walked the knot boat to the edge where it met the bone bridge, and then the knot boat decided it had been a bridge all along and let us step onto it. The river drew the lantern's flame down into itself and fed it to the silver fish. And for a heartbeat, the water glowed with an inland dawn. Then it was gone. The hollow court did not grow out of the earth like a castle. It hung like a decision, suspended from chains made of things that had never existed but still weighed something. The great hall was a long negative space, lined with tapestries woven from unspoken wishes. When you looked at them, you felt sad without knowing why. Servants came, some human, some not, and some whose bodies were human up to the last finger joint, where claws unfurled like questions. They carried bowls of salt and bowls of shadow. A woman with white scars like runes across her cheeks dipped her hands in the salt and cupped my face as if memorizing it, then touched my temples with shadow the way a priest might draw a holy sign. It was colder than the river's second skin. When she pulled away, I felt marked, but not owned. A promise then, not a seal. "Your rooms," Kael said, and we climbed a stair that had nowhere to go but everywhere at once. The first door we passed had a keyhole shaped like a crescent moon, and light spilled from it as if someone were bottling summer on the other side. The second door had a keyhole that was an eye. The eye blinked when I looked at it. I did not look again. At the third door, Kael stopped. "This one," he said. The door wore no keyhole. It had a knocker shaped like a moth. "It answers best to those who ask badly." "I'm good at that," I said. "Liora of Darglan," Kael said, and it sounded like a benediction, which I resented. "If you dream tonight, do not answer your name. If you must answer, lie. If you cannot lie, say the river's name backward." "What is the river's name?" And he smiled, and it was wrong again in the right way. "If I gave you everything now, what would be left for you to steal from me?" He left me there with the moth knocker and my stubbornness and a loneliness I had brought with me like luggage. The door opened when I thought a mean thought about him, mean, but not unfair. Inside was a room that remembered what rooms were supposed to do. Keep the outside out, keep the inside in. Let a person be a person with a bowl of water and a bed that did not bruise, with a window that looked either upon the river or upon a field of ghost lilies or upon a night that had never ended yet, depending on where you stood. On the table was a plate of bread and a dish of butter. Both were still warm in defiance of time. I ate with my hands and my whole attention, and for 5 minutes I believed in gods again. Then I washed, and when the water touched my wrists, the river's second skin burned off like mist. I lay down on the bed. It breathed once under me, an animal about to sleep. I did not mean to dream. I meant to stay awake and count the things I could break. But the room smelled of rosemary and smoke, my mother's shawl, the village, the filed edges of my life, and all at once the ledger of keeping watch tipped from my hands. When the dream came, it did not ask permission, because dreams never do. I stood on the bone bridge again, only this time the river was above me like a second sky, and things swam through it that were not fish and not stars. A woman came out of the current, walking on the underside of the water as if it were a pane of glass. Her hair drifted around her as if it had decided to live its own life. Her eyes were the color of the place you go when you stop thinking. She wore a crown of lilies that did not wilt. "Liora," she said. The sound of my name bent the bridge. Somewhere in the waking world, a moth tapped once against wood, as if to tell me to mind Aunt Magda's warnings. I closed my mouth against the answer the dream wanted from me. "Liora," the woman said again, smiling like a cut. "Do you remember me?" "You're the river," I said carefully. not answering what she asked. "I am what is left of her," the woman said, "before a king without a name took his and made me a gate." She reached down, as if we were two children passing a string through bars. Between her fingers a line stretched, silver, thin as hair. "Hold," she said. "If you are pulled, let go. If you are pushed, pull back. If you are loved, ask what is being bought. If you are hated, ask what is being guarded. If you are offered a key, refuse it," I whispered, dizzy with the closeness of wisdom and water. "Only if you are still the Liora who stood with a lantern and pretended she could choose," she said. "Keys go two ways. Knives do too. Remember that even the hollow has bones. Remember that a name is a knife until it becomes a shield." "Who are you?" I asked. "If you are the river, what are you to the king?" Her smile gentled. "I am what he could not drown." The silver line flicked like a fishtail. A pressure came against my chest, as if something had leaned on my heartbeat. I thought of Kael's eyes and the way he pronounced the word ordinary like a sacrament. I thought of the antler's shadow brushing a star into a new place. I thought of warm bread, of knives, of the moth knocking once against a door with no keyhole, of 5 contradictory things I wanted and the way desire makes architecture out of air. "Liora," the river woman said for the 3rd time. The bridge groaned. I opened my mouth to lie. No sound came. The dream had taken my honesty and my falsehood both and pinned them under the same thumb. "Tell me your true name," the river woman breathed, and the silver line between us brightened like dawn through a slit. My heart said a sound that wasn't the one people used to fetch me. It was a stranger's syllable, a word I had never heard with ears. It opened the air like a seam, and I felt the room where I slept lean toward it. The moth at the door lift on a whisper of wing. I clamped my teeth on it. I didn't answer. The river woman smiled as if I had handed her a coin anyway. "You tie well," she said. "You may not drown." The dream thinned. I woke with the silver taste of it in my mouth. Across the room, the window looked upon a sky with a wound in it. The hollow moon. On the sill lay a spore of shadow in the shape of a fingertip. Kael had stood there. He had not crossed. He had watched. Under my tongue, the stranger's syllable burned like brandy. I sat up and listened. In the hall outside my door, footsteps moved. The knot bells of the court answered them. Someone stopped, breathed. A whisper, only half syllables. A plan, a plea, or a plot, or all three. And under it, like a bass note in the river, I heard my name again, in the voice of someone who did not know he had said it. I got up. I touched the door and felt it shiver. The moth in the knocker lifted one paper wing and settled in a new place, as if to see better. "Fine," I said to the room and to myself, and maybe to the king whose name I would not use in the dark. "Let us go find out what kind of monster he is and what kind I am." The hallway had other doors, some with keyholes, some with eyes, some with whispers knitted into their lintels. I went the way the shadow fingertip pointed, toward a stair that pretended to go down, but when you set your foot on it, took you sideways into the court's spine. There, in a gallery lined with portraits that refused to show faces, a boy sat with his back against a column, holding his breath the way my nephew did when nightmares walked across his chest. He looked up at me as if he had read every way the story could go, and was asking me to pick the best one. "Are you the new tithe?" he asked. "I'm the girl who ties knots," I said, because it was true in at least 2 ways. "And you are?" "Julin," he said. He had the accent of the North Bogs, where the men are born knowing the weight of their own funeral stones, and the women are born choosing which way to tip them. I'm the king's bad idea. Everyone is someone's, I said. He stood. He could not have been more than 15. Around his throat, a black ribbon hugged tight enough to bruise. He saw me looking and put a hand over it as if I might be a knife. You should not be alone in hallways, he said. They talk here. You might answer and not know it. Then walk with me, I said. Talk at the walls for me. Let us drown them in ordinary things until they choke. Like bread and butter, he said, surprising me. Exactly, I said. We went together toward the heart of the hollow court, where a throne sat like the idea of sitting, and the King Kael stood beside it as if he had remembered that thrones are traps. He glanced up, saw us, and I watched his eyes do the arithmetic of 100 possibilities. He looked not like a man who owned a kingdom, but like a man who lived with a very old, very hard problem. For the first time since the river said my name, I wanted something of him that wasn't a knife. Liora, he said quietly, and his voice made the moth in my throat stir. Kael, I said back. The court gathers at moonfall, he said. They will want to measure you with their teeth. His head. Let them count carefully, I said. They may choke. Julian's mouth twitched. Kael's did not. But the shadow of his antlers brushed a star again, and somewhere a name I had not spoken yet flexed its wings. And the lilies, which had drifted out of my story when I left the river, appeared again as if they had been floating along behind me all this time. Patient as destiny, they rested for a moment at the foot of the throne. 3 of them turned to face me and opened. Inside each lay something that wasn't a flower at all. A knife, a key, a mirror the size of a coin. The court inhaled. I remembered Aunt Magda's counsel, the river woman's warning, my own hunger for warm bread. I reached out my hand and chose. Chapter 2. Knives, remember the hand. In the hush after the lilies opened, I felt the court count my breathing. It was an adding up of debts, an inventory of bones. The knife lay in the first blossom, the steel no wider than my thumb and as simple as rain. The key in the second was old and pearled with something like frost, too beautiful for doors that ought to be opened. The coin mirror in the third was so polished I saw not my face in it, but the hole it would carve in whatever I looked at. I remembered Aunt Magda. Refuse beauty, refuse pity, refuse a key. If he offers you a knife, take it. I don't need a mirror, I said to the air, which here had the habit of reporting to the walls. Whoever would want to be trapped inside their own face? The coin winked once and went dark, as if sulking. I did not touch it. And pity, Kael said softly, the syllables careful, tastes like honey but rots the teeth. He meant the court, or himself, or me. I bowed my head the smallest degree that could still be called a refusal. The key waited in its lily like a promise wearing its good shoes. I felt the drag of curiosity in my gut. Do you know this one? Will it fit the door with the eye, the door with the moon, or the door with no keyhole at all? The key smelled faintly of pine sap and snowfall, early memories with edges too bright. It felt familiar in the way a wrong choice does, because we've rehearsed it so often in our heads. No, I said to it, and the word hurt my tongue. The lily closed over the key as if to keep it warm for someone else's mistake. The knife did not try to persuade me. That's how knives are. Either you pick them up or you don't. Either way, they remember your hand. I lifted it from the lily and felt the small weight settle like a new scar. The court exhaled. Somewhere, cloth rustled in anger. Somewhere else, small, soundless hands clapped. Julian, beside me, eased his shoulders. Kael did not move at all, but I felt the space between his ribs change shape. "It is yours," he said, and did not reach for it. "It will not cut anything you do not name first. Knives can be taught manners." I turned it once, twice. The blade drank the light and gave none back. "What is it called?" I asked, because the river had taught me that names are locks and doors both. "Call it what you like," said a voice above us, cat smooth and cold. A woman had stepped out along a gallery where, a moment before, no one had been. She wore white, stitched with pale blue thread that made her look like she had been carved from hoarfrost. Her hair, bound up like a vow, was streaked with a metallic sheen. "The court has names enough to drown in. It is better to use the ones you make yourself." Kael's gaze flicked. "Only once, but enough." "Lady Soraya," he said, and the regard he paid her was of the kind a man offers an earthquake. Not kindness, not fear, calculation. "We have time before moonfall gathers everyone with a grievance and a goblet. Must you begin yours now?" "I begin nothing," Soraya said with the certainty of people who have forgotten what it means to be wrong. "I end things. I end the days when you bring dangerous mortals to drink river water from your hands." "Do you mean me?" I asked. She looked at me then, for real. It was like stepping into snow that held. "I mean what you represent when you stand beside him with a blade and a story cleaved in two," she said. "I mean sentiment." She made the word sound like sickness you catch in a crowded room. "I mean the false mercy of a king who thinks to write himself a different ending. I mean the deep foolishness of love. If we're putting a price on foolishness, let's leave the ledger open," I said. "I don't intend to balance it tonight." Soraya examined me as if she had been offered a fruit she couldn't quite guess the name of, and feared liking it. "The river wrapped her," she said to Kael. "You can smell it. You did not do that, did you? You do not bind what you wish to want." Kael's mouth went still. It had not been moving, not really, but now it remembered how to be a line. "You asked me not to lie to you this century. Remember? I do." "Then no," he said. "The binding on her is not mine." "Then unbind it," she snapped, "or send her back. You know what happens to those the river has called who are returned unsworn." His voice was flat. "Do not order me to slaughter with your good intentions. I have done it too often alone." Soraya's hands tightened on the gallery rail. I saw the tiny quiver of blue thread at her wrist. It spelled a rune I couldn't read. "Moonfall," she said, "will be very long." She inclined her head to me, a gesture that at another court might have meant respect. Here, perhaps, it meant, "You will be a problem." How delightful! She withdrew with the sound of shutting snow. Julian breathed again. "She is his seneschal," he murmured from the corner of his mouth. "She keeps time and takes it away. Don't let her write you into an hour where you don't belong." "Do you belong?" I asked. He touched the black ribbon at his throat and didn't answer. The bruise it hid was older than it should have been. I had the sharp urge to slip a finger under the ribbon and pull until it snapped. The court would eat that gesture and chew the tender parts last. "Liora," Kael said, "we will walk. Soraya is right about one thing. There is scarce time, and I owe you context before my enemies feed you theirs. What you owe me," I said aloud enough for the hall to hear, "is the truth." The shadow of his antlers blurred at the edges as if a star behind them were trying to get free. "That is a matter of delivery, not debt," he said. Come. We walked the spine of the court, which is not a corridor so much as a thought that believes in itself. The walls were hung with memories you could step into if you lacked sense. A war fought under a sky like a split lip. A woman in a red cloak laughing as she stole a crown and put it under a briar. A boy, was it Julian, standing before a dark tree and saying, yes, and then saying it again as if to overwrite the first. Do not step sideways, Kael said. I won't, I said. He let the silence stay for a while, which I respected. Men who use silence as a weapon grind it down all at once until it is blunt. Men who know it is a tool keep its edge bright and choose when to cut. You think your village is the only ledger? He said at last. Darglan with its tithes and its lilies, you think you know the story we are in. I think the story we are in is old and thinks it can roll me flat like dough, I said. I think it will find I am a knot under the heel. He accepted that. Long ago, he said, there was a river that cut a country in two and kept both halves watered. She wore no name. She was simply what the world did there. Then men drew borders, and borders drew kings. One of those kings, young, praised, my father's father's father, planted a city like a flag at the river's bend and drank every spring dry with celebration. The river asked for quiet and was given parade. She asked for time and was given walls. She asked for a way to go on loving the land without being devoured. And the king smiled and promised and promised and promised. And then it was cruel, making him say the next part. But part of me wanted to hear him speak his own guilt. The part of me with the knife, the king married her. The word fell heavy, and heavier still the one that followed. In the old way, not with vows and rings, but with binds and names. He made her gate to his power and mouth to his thirst. When she remembered to flood, he carved canyons in her and named them irrigation. When she remembered her own will, he called it disobedience and set a net of laws over her like chain. And he was Godoctree. The river woman said she is what you could not drown, I murmured, and his mouth ghosted a flinch. She is, he said, and she is angry with reason, and I. He hesitated, a small pause that was honest. I inherited all this. The nets, the canyons, the chains, a palace cut from promises. I tried to unmake what I am while sitting on a throne made of the same. I could not. So you took another door, I said. You came to my village with lilies. Not me, he said, a tired amusement at the edges of the words. The river will choose. Sometimes she chooses those who hate me. Sometimes she chooses those who pity me, which is worse. Sometimes she chooses those who will not choose, and the court turns them into statues you can look at and feel virtuous because you didn't do it. He looked at me then, harder than he had before. Sometimes she chooses someone who can hear a name she has never been taught and keep it in her mouth until it stops burning. The stranger's syllable fluttered under my tongue like a moth caught in sugar. What do you want from me? I asked, and I meant it in the hardest way. To break a habit, he said. To break it in me and in the court and in her. To break it without breaking us. That's 4 things, I said. We have 1 to spare. My hand tightened on the knife until the hilt learned the map of me. We had come to a balcony that looked not over earth or river, but over a memory of both. The hollow moon hung low, its eaten-out heart pale as bone. Against that wounded light, I saw figures moving in the air, tethered to nothing and to everything, the second-breath dancers, practicing the steps they would do later to other people's music. Their chords whipped invisibly through the dark, anchoring them to rules you couldn't see. "What does Julin owe you?" I asked, because the black ribbon was a thought with its hand already up. Kael leaned his elbows on the rail. He did not look like a king then, not by any story I'd been told. He looked like a man who had run far and misplaced the reason. "Nothing," he said. "Everything." "Helpful," I snapped. "I took him," Kael said, ignoring my lash. "From a bog king who would have fed him to reeds. I hung that ribbon on him to confuse the things that might want his breath. It holds the shadow to his throat when the court gets hungry. I told him he could leave whenever he chose. He chooses to stay. Some days I think that makes me good. Most days I know it makes me dangerous." "And the ribbon?" I asked. "Does it come off?" "Yes," he said. "Once." "What happens then?" "He is has. Then he has to know what to do with his own shadow," Kael said, and the weight of pity in him was like a sack of stones at a river crossing. He did not spill it. Moonfall came at last like a dropped note on a dark floor. The court gathered the way storms do, in murmurs and coats of light. Soria stood at Kael's left with her frostwork stitches, a man with a pen lodged behind his ear and ink stains up his fingers stood at his right. The pen had a name. I knew it, the way you know certain smells from childhood, even if you cannot place the room. A man whose sleeves were gardens of thorns smiled at me with a mouth that had fed on too much sweetness. A woman whose eyes were polished stones flicked a glance at my knife, then at my hand, and did small arithmetic there. Julin slid into his place half an arm behind Kael's shoulder, where the shadow of the throne fell into a cradle. When he stood there, the ribbon at his throat went very still, as if listening. "Court," Kael said, and the word made the room sit up. "We are gathered to say the true things and swallow the ones that will rot us. We will not marry this night to a lie. We will not offer mercy with one hand and hold a chain in the other. We will listen to the river's witness and mine, and then we will see if there is a road that keeps us from being monsters and not hem too fast. I know only the one kind of monster you find when you look for roads," Soria murmured. But the room heard. The floor split without cracking, which is a trick, and a well rose in the center, broad as a promise and deep as regret. Water frothed within, lilies trembled on the surface, as if they had seen a ghost and recognized themselves. A woman climbed out. Not the river woman exactly, but a version stamped thin to stand in rooms like this. Her hair fell wet, and her eyes were that color of thoughtless quiet. She wore no crown now. She carried a bowl made of some substance that chose not to be named. "Witness," the court said in one voice. It was ugly. It sounded like prayer over a body no one had loved enough to keep. I hated them for it. I hated myself for hearing my own voice in the harmony. "I bring my sight," the water woman said. She set the bowl on the floor with hands that did not shake. "And my complaint." "We hear you," Kael said, and I could see the effort it cost him not to kneel. She looked at him and smiled that cut smile again. "Do you, after all these years?" "I intend to," he said. "Intention is the smallest coin we can pay with, but it is not nothing. Intention is what bought me your great-grandfather's ring." She snapped, and in the bowl a current twisted. My stomach twisted with it. Intention is the breath you give to pain, to keep it alive. "Do you know your own name yet, Kael? Your mother's?" She turned. Her gaze slid over the court and fanged itself when it reached me. "Do you know yours, river child?" I did not answer. The moth in my throat beat once against my teeth. "This is Liora of Darglin," Kael said, but he said it like a man putting a torch down away from kindling. "Let her speak." The river woman's voice softened not at all. Let her say why she has come. Let her say what she asks. Let her say if she will put a knife into my chain or into my son. The court made the old predator noise. Oh, that sounded like pity clapping hands. It made the lilies shiver. I breathed again. I looked at Kael, who did not look back. Good, good. I came, I said, because you called. And why did you stay? She asked. Because the bread was warm, because the moth had moved, because the boy with the ribbon reminded me of my nephew, because I wanted to see whether a man could be a man and a monster, and if one could be the knife to unmake the other, because I want to learn my true name and survive it, because there is a habit to break, I said, and I have a stubborn hand. She considered that. What do you ask? I ask for a knife that will not cut names out of people unless they ask, I said. I ask for a key that fits a door both ways. I ask for a mirror that shows the face and not the wound. I ask for warm bread. The court laughed in a ripple, quickly strangled. Soraya didn't, and neither did Julian. Kael's hand folded on nothing. You ask for kindness, the river woman said. This is a court that was built on cleverness. Then we will build a room inside it that the court does not own, I said, astonishing myself with a certainty that filled my bones before my brain could argue. And in that room we will stitch together the parts of us that float apart. We will make a table with bread that stays warm. We will name ourselves there and leave those names on the table when we go back out into teeth. He's mending! The hush that followed had a texture. It had the feeling of a thrown stone that will hit the surface any moment now. You think names can be put aside like hats, Soraya said, contempt coiling elegant as her stitchwork. I think they can be set down, I said, if the room keeps them safe, and if the occupant remembers to pick them back up when they leave. The man with ink sleeves nodded once, as if a very old mark he'd been waiting to make had finally found the paper. The thorn-sleeved lord smiled his sweet-toothed smile, and I was not fool enough to misread that. The river woman bent and dipped her hand into the bowl. Names are not hats, she said, but there were places once where we set them aside to wash, bathhouses for who you were, schools for who you might be, courts even for who we had been together. Then men moved into those rooms with conquest in their pockets and called them palaces. You cannot bring back a room by saying it. It must be built. Build it then, Kael said too quickly. Soraya's look could have cut silk without touching it. No, I said at the same time, because Aunt Magda's house taught you certain patterns of refusal. The river woman's head tilted. No, not yet, I said. You will not rush me into making the thing that will be held against me when it does not fix you on the first try. Everything worth keeping learns you slowly. That includes rooms. She smiled for the first time without the cut. It made the hall seem less dangerous for a breath. So you do not ask for mercy, she said. You ask to work. I ask to mend, I said. If that is work, then yes. How? That was Soraya, sharp as winter, with bread and talk, with a knife that remembers the hand, I said, and lifted mine. With a key I haven't taken, with a mirror I refused because it would flatter me into a trap, with Julian's ribbon untied and tied again in a shape he chooses, with your pen set down and used for a letter to your mother instead of a law. I looked at the ink-sleeved man. He blinked, surprised by the sight of me seeing him, with room for the king to be loved without being worshipped, and the river to be looked at without being owned. Fine words, murmured the thorned one. Fine as silk. The last girl had such words, and we made a flag of her, and now she flies above the west tower, and the birds use her to teach their children what wind is. Julin made a sound like a swallowed stone. You will not hang me from your tower, I said, and my voice was calm in the way a dog's is when it knows its teeth. You will not put my words to work cleaning your boots. You will not turn my refusal into your feast. I lifted the knife and told it, remember him. The blade hummed once, low as a cat in a happy corner. The thorned man stopped smiling. Enough, Kael said. Quiet, not for effect. Enough of performing our ugliness because we are afraid not to. Lady Soraya, Toll, that was the penman's name. It unfolded like a map. Lord Briar, all of you, hear me. I will not undefine myself to make the court easier to sit in. The river has called Liora. I have brought her. I will not make her a banner or a sword without asking, and I ask. He turned to me and gave me his hands, both open. Kings do not do that. Liora of Darglan, will you try? Not to save me, not to save us, to make a room like the one you described and see who we are in it? Will you let me enter as a man who is sometimes a monster, and bring with you the river that is what I could not drown? My heart was a door that suddenly knew it had hinges. 3 refusals, I said, remembering Aunt Magda and the lilies. We have done one tonight. Beauty. We will do pity later, because someone will be in need, and I will hate you for it. Key, we have already addressed. I will try, I said, and I will ask for 3 promises in return. The court hissed like wind through teeth. Soraya closed her eyes, perhaps praying to the god of exhausted secretaries. Say them, Kael said, and his hands did not close. 1. You do not use my name, the true one, when I find it, as a rule in your palace, I said. You do not carve it in a lintel, or bury it in a wall, or drink it when you feel weak. 2. You do not bind Julin with a ribbon he cannot remove without dying. When we untie it, we tie it anew with his say in the knot. 3. When I build this room, when we build it, you will be the first to take off your crown and set it on the table with the bread, and you will not be the last. Kael nodded after each like a man taking a blow he knew was coming. The last took him a heartbeat longer. I swear, he said. You swear, echoed the river woman, and the bowl's surface did a strange thing, a moving that wasn't a ripple so much as a breath. If he breaks it, I will cut, I said, and the knife, pleased, warmed my palm. Then it is bound, said the river woman, but gently now, as if tying 2 ends of thread in a bow, not a sailor's knot. Build your room, bring me word of it, send me bread. She sank as she had come, more water than woman now. The well lowered itself into the floor. The court found its voices and used them to talk about everything but the thing that had just happened. Kael turned his hands and took mine. Fingers to fingers, it was for the room we would one day build, a rehearsal in a place too dangerous for such things. His hands were warm. I felt the echo of the lantern's small bird on his knuckle. Tomorrow, he said, you choose the place. Not in the court, I said, and not in the village. The riverbank, he suggested. Between, I agreed. It was a kind of magic on its own. Julin drifted to us as if afraid to make ripples. Up close, the ribbon at his throat was sewn with minute sigils, the sort you can only write when you have loved someone too carefully. He put his hand over it. You will untie this? He asked, not looking at Kael at all. I will, I said. Not tonight. The court is watching and wants a show. "I have been a show enough," he said, and for the first time I heard his age. He touched my knife with a fingernail. "What will you call it?" I thought of Aunt Magda's talk, of the knot-boat, of the bridge, of the room that wasn't and was. I thought of how a knife is both invitation and threat, of how my hand on hilt had felt like telling a secret to something that could answer. "Guest," I said at last. The knife settled in a way that meant it approved. "It will only cut what I have truly invited, and it will eat ugly company." Julian grinned once, suddenly a boy. "Then invite Lord Briar," he whispered, wicked as a lantern flame in the wind. "Later," I murmured. We left the hall by a door with no keyhole. It opened to a garden that should not, by rights, have existed under a hollow moon, a place of moss that drank light softly, of branches righting themselves toward each other and pausing before they touched, of water that talked under its breath. The court's noise thinned behind us like a bad dream remembering it had other rooms to patrol. Kael and I did not speak at first. There is a kind of ache that needs the fact of another person more than their words. In the garden, moths stitched little silver notes onto the black cloth of the air. One came and rested on my sleeve. It was like the knocker, only alive. "I mean to give you every tool I have," Kael said at last. "I will not decide how you use them. You will make mistakes. So will I. We will try not to make the kind that lock." "Have you ever cooked?" I asked. His smile was the ghost of a real one. "No? Then let me teach you to burn bread." "Bread?" He looked almost offended. "Warm bread is a god," I said. "If we are to build a room where names can be set down and picked up, we will need a god we can make with our hands." He thought about the blasphemy of that and chose to like it. "Very well," he said. "We will scorch flour and water until it forgives us." We were still laughing, softly, when the air changed. A pressure slid into the garden, uninvited, and my knife lifted in my hand like a dog that has heard a footstep it knows means harm. The moth on my sleeve spread its wings to look larger. "Don't," Julian said, and it took me a second to register that the warning was not to me. Soraya stepped out from behind a tree that had no business hiding anyone. Her frostwork gleamed less kindly beneath this sky. Beside her was the thorn-sleeved Lord Briar, his smile redder than before. "You were not finished," Soraya said to Kael. "You think I will let you end the meeting where you can control the applause." He usmut. "You can control the agenda in the morning," Kael said, and the kindness in his tone was borrowed for the night. "We are done now." "No," Briar said pleasantly, "we are not. Because your pet mortal has just promised to build a room that will take food out of the mouths of my children. What will they eat when pity grows thin? What will the court dine on when we are not permitted to drink from the old wine?" "You call suffering cuisine," I said, and Guest leaned into my palm, hungry to be introduced. "I call it harvest," he said. "Of course, you are a farmer's girl, you should know. And wary, I know the difference between fields you plant and fields you salt," I said, and then the garden learned what my knife's name meant. I did not move first. He did. A casual step toward Julian, a fingertip lifted as if to adjust the ribbon, a smirk he'd been waiting to use for an hour. Guest's blade did not cut his hand when it reached for my boy's throat. It cut the gesture instead, the thought behind it, the ugly hunger. Briar flinched as if I'd nicked his ear, because something had bled in him, the part that tells you you may turn a child's vulnerability into performative grief for your own supper. Remember him, I told the knife again, but softly. The Lord's mouth worked. Nothing clever came out. Soraya's eyes were narrowed, not at me, but at the way the air had rewritten itself. "This is what you bring into my court?" she asked Kael. "Sentiment with teeth?" "Yes," Kael said. "For once, let us use it to eat something that deserves devouring." "You endanger us," she said. "You endanger yourself." "All things worth changing require danger," I said before he could. "If you want safety, go be a tree. Even then, lightning will find you." "For someone who refuses keys," Soraya murmured, but her gaze flicked to Julian's ribbon, and I pressed toward him so that my shoulder touched his. He did not lean into me. Desire denied itself here too often to be casual, but he did not lean away. "There will be reprisals," Briar said in a voice that remembered how to be smooth. "Moonfall ends. The court will put its face back on. When it does, your room will be a nail that catches our silk. You know what we do to nails." His smile returned, less red, more patient. "We bend them until they forget they were anything else." "You tried that with me," Kael said, very soft. "Perhaps that is why I remember." They went. Soraya last, turning to take one longer look at me, storing me in some drawer of her head where she kept paradoxes and splinters. When the garden's pressure eased, we stood there with our ribs remembering how to be unlatched. I put the knife away. The moth climbed my collar as if to ride my pulse. "You will have to sleep," Julian said, the practitioner of nightmare saying so kindly. "I will," I said. "I will leave the door open for someone kind, and the window for someone unafraid, and the floor for no one at all." "Say my name if the bad comes," he said. "If you need a boy with too much ribbon, say my name." "I don't know if I should," I said. "Names are knives." "And shields," he finished, drier than a twig. "Let me be one. It would be a use worth the bruise." We parted at the stair that chose sideways. Kael walked me to my door and didn't try to follow. The moth knocker had shifted its angle by a hair, admiring the line of itself. "Good night," he said, and the old phrase felt new in his mouth, as if he had not said it to anyone who had a choice whether to stay. "Sleep," I said. "Dream if you can. If the river calls, do not answer." "I will lie," he said, "or say her name backward." "You don't know it," I reminded him. "No," he said, and smiled his wrong-right smile. "But I know yours is angry already, and I mean to be there when it forgives you." He left. The room let me in with the relief of hands that have been holding an hour for you. On the table, the bread was again warm. Someone had changed it. Or time had bent. I broke it, and the steam rose like a small, grateful ghost. I washed my wrists. The river's second skin had returned, thin as sorrow. It sloughed again like fog. I lay on the bed that breathed. I did not mean to dream, but meaning not to dream is one of those invitations the old things accept with a smile. This time the dream was of a kitchen. It was not Aunt Magda's. There were no nettles tied in bunches or copper kettles polished until they could see you blush. This kitchen was the kind you find in stories that pretend to be practical. Big hearth, wide table, a crook-backed cat that had an opinion about flour. On the table lay a pile of names, folded like napkins. Some were stained with wine, some were starched so hard they could stand themselves up. Some were soft and old and kept for the sake of someone who could not bear to throw them away. The river woman kneaded dough. Her hands were the river, and the river was her hands. She was humming. It might have been one of the village songs, or a tune from before villages learned not to sleep with their doors unlatched. The dough looked like breath made visible. "Don't wake up," she said, as if I were a child she was trying to keep sweet. "Your king is making vows again. He isn't good at it when he thinks he is awake. By every he had, into they saved do. He had will saved a laughter of. He is not my king," I said, because even in the dream I had a stubborn hand, but it sounded like someone's king, and I hated that. She cut the dough with a knife that was very much like mine and not like mine at all. She laid the pieces on boards and covered them with cloth, like the thin skin the river had taught me to wear. "You will build your room," she said. "You will fill it with dangerous kindness. You will fail often and beautifully. You will tie knots that require teeth to undo. You will lose a door you thought you could not do without. You will love someone who does not know how to be loved except in pieces. You will be loved by someone who thinks love is a habit like law." She looked up, and in her eyes I saw my nephew sleeping with his fist on his chest. "You will be offered a key again. You will not refuse it. It will be because of bread." "Is that fate?" I asked. "Or a threat?" "It is a recipe," she said, "and you may add herbs." I wanted to ask the name again, the true one that had burned my mouth. It hovered. It nearly said itself. I remembered Aunt Magda's counsel. If you dream, do not answer your name. If you must answer, lie. If you cannot lie, River, I said, what do you look like when you are happy? She blinked. Something like a laugh happened to the edges of her mouth. Like rain, she said, on roofs, on tongues, on backs of hands. Like fog deciding to forgive a field, like a woman who married no one and went walking. Then let us go walking, I said. We did. The way people walk in kitchens, from stove to table to window to sink, carrying hot things and cold ones, and a sense of having remembered something vital you will forget as soon as you step out of the room. When the dream broke, it broke like an egg. It ran into morning. Morning in the hollow court is not like other mornings. The light comes in sideways, a slice through a world that wanted to remain closed. I went to the window. The sky had not healed. The hole ate at the moon, but the air had decided to smell like baking, and that was a victory I would take. Someone, several someones, had left things at my door. Soraya's hourly anger, folded into a neat note, Toll's ink bottle, half full, and offered without instruction, Julian's ribbon, a short length, practice not tied and tied again until even the shadow thread had learned it was allowed to change shape, and a small bag of flour. It was not from Kael. He would not have sent flour in a bag so humble. This came from the kitchens, the heart of any place that hopes to be a home. I picked them up and went wandering, not to the hall, not to the court, to the places the court forgot to own, the outbends where water had once tried to curl through, the dead ends where children had drawn on walls with charcoal and had not been stopped, the stairwells that went up and didn't come down. I found a room that had been used once for storing winter, salts and apples, and the sort of melancholy that grows in brine. It had a window that looked into the mouth of a corridor and out onto nothing at all. It had a table with one leg shorter than the others. It had hooks that would hold spoons and light. It was a bad room. It was perfect. Here, I said to no one, and to the river, and to the little boy in Darglan whose breathing ratcheted when the nightmares sat on him. Here we will set our names down. Here we will burn bread and call it practice. Here we will be generous and fail. Here we will forgive ourselves and try again. The walls, uninterested in rhetoric but fond of nail holes and good intentions, consented. My knife hummed, eager for the kind of cutting that makes way, not harm. I made myself busy. When you have been chosen and brought and told you will bind or unbind gods and kings, there is a low and holy relief in measuring flour. I did not know where to find yeast. I did not know if this court believed in such domestic, sensible magic. I asked guests to remember it for me, the way it had remembered the Lord's ugly hunger. The knife warmed, then cooled, not a yes, not a no, but a thought. Kael found me with sleeves rolled to the roughness of my forearms. He stood in the doorway, not stepping through. I had the sudden, uncharitable wish to see him with flour on his hands. It felt sacrilegious and right. You chose, he said. Between, I said. Between is where the good trouble happens. I brought nothing, you asked, he said, offering honesty, perhaps to see if I would count it. Soraya thinks I am a fool. Toll thinks I am a paragraph waiting for a knife. Briar, his throat worked. Briar thinks it will be fun to break what we build. And you? He smiled at the flower in my hair, one corner of his mouth. I think if the gods come anywhere, it will be to a room like this. And I think if we fail, it will be for reasons we may forgive. Roll up your sleeves, I said. We will fail beautifully. He stepped in. The room took him the way warm air takes a bird. We stood shoulder to shoulder at the wobbly table. I showed him Flower's trick of making your hands belong to the work. He showed me how to fold a thing in halves again and again until the halves remember they are one. We did not talk about vows or knives or rooms that live inside rooms. We talked about heat. We talked about patience. We talked about the way bread tells you with its smell when it has forgiven you for being new. Julian came with a grin as careless as a gift. He set the short old ribbon on the table and told me about the knots he had learned. I cut the air between us with guests so that his practice could live without the court's shadow telling it what to be. Soraya came with a list and left with a piece of rough dough to take back to her office like a worry stone. Tulip-faced courtiers slid through to see where power had gone. Some stayed to wash a bowl or taste the crust we burned and sobbed over. Some fled, allergic to rooms where no one could be brilliant at someone else's expense. When the first loaf came out, it was ugly as a first love and twice as brave. I broke it. The steam had the silver thread of the river in it. Kael took a piece and smiled from his bones outward. Julian took a piece and did not hide the way he held it to his nose for a long moment before eating. I held mine and heard Aunt Magda's voice. Ordinary things are holy. We still have enemies, Kael said, as if reminding the room not to be drunk on itself. I know, I said, tearing diligently. They can eat with us or go hungry. And Kapot, that is not how courts work, Soraya said from the doorway. She had flour on her sleeve. It thrilled me beyond reason. It is how rooms work, I said. And we are working a room. We will need something sharp, Julian said, not looking at guest. Not for them, for when the ribbon comes off. We will need a mirror, Kael said, surprising himself. Not to flatter us, to show us we are not as monstrous as we fear and not as innocent as we wish. And a key, I said, allowing myself the shiver I had denied in the hall. Not to lock doors, to let those who want to go, go, and those who wish to enter, enter. Refuse the key, Aunt Magda's voice said in my head, fond and stern. Not this one, the river woman said in the steam. We ate. It made a prayer of us, which embarrassed me enough that I laughed. The laugh cracked something open, and the light came in, thin and real. The day after moonfall pressed its weight against the palace and found, to its surprise, that some doors did not open the way they used to. In the hall, Far from our bad, perfect room, Lord Briar sharpened his beautiful grievances and told them my name. My knife twitched in its sheath, remembering without malice the way scars do when the rain sets in. On a balcony stitched in frost, Soraya composed a list of dangers that included kindness and kitchens. Julian, ribbon still on but looser, stood at a window and practiced saying his name as if it were someone else's, just in case it needed to be. And somewhere under everything, a river, unbound only in pieces, smiled like rain and waited for the bread I had promised her. Chapter 3. The Room with No Crown. Before a change becomes a law, it is an argument. Before it is an argument, it is a room. Before it is a room, it is one stubborn person saying, "Here." By noon, the bad, perfect room had taught us the rhythm of its imperfect grace. We failed, then fixed, burned, then buttered, knotted, then unknotted. People came for warmth and found work. They came for gossip and found their own hands. The court does not know what to do with a place that does not let you stand apart and sparkle. It can only be entered by people who are willing to put their wrists into bowls and be rinsed of the day's cleverness. Toll, the ink-sleeved, sat on a stool near the window, turning his pen between two fingers like a man translating a prayer into a new alphabet. "If I write nothing today," he murmured, "and only hold dough, I may remember which laws were worth writing." "Write one word," I said, folding my loaf again. "Bread." He smiled and wrote it upon his palm. The ink sank into his skin as if his hand had been waiting for that particular speech. Soraya returned, not with lists, but with a jar of yeast and a face that wanted not to hope. She set the jar on the table as if leaving a small child with people she did not trust yet, and moved to the stove like a woman who had once warmed her fingers by honest fire and meant to remember how. Lord Briar did not come. Of course he didn't. He would send someone later to taste and sneer, failing privately and gloriously when no one watched. Some men cannot be taught except by their own stomachs. Julian came and went, his ribbon loosened to a polite whisper. Under his breath he tried words for his name, old ones and new, borrowed ones and ones he invented. That's the thing about names. Once you know they can be crafted, it is hard not to keep making them. Kael stood sometimes at my shoulder and sometimes across from me, rolling the dough as if he could teach his hands a gentleness he had not dared. Every time the dough stuck, he smiled in genuine surprise, as if anything in his life had clung without a hook. Every time he pulled his hands back, they took flour with them, a pale cheekbone on each knuckle. It should not have pleased me as much as it did. It did? "Between," he said, tasting the word like warm honey. "It is a country I have not ruled." "Good," I said. "Leave it ungoverned." The river sent her smell in the steam when the loaves rose. I had promised her bread. She was sending me appetite. I thought of the dream kitchen, the folded names, the knife that was like mine and not. The stranger's syllable still warmed my mouth, an ember I would not blow on yet. Not until I could be sure whose house the fire would heat. When the second batch came out less ugly, a small cheer escaped the door someone had gathered in the corridor. Noses lifted, the way a village's children gather when the miller's cart creaks back full. I cracked the crust. Steam scripted itself upward with a curl that read, if I had been foolish enough to read it, a word like welcome. Of course, that was when a hand, polite, gloved, unwanted, knocked on our lintel. Briar's second stood there, a man with a mouth like a seamstress's needle. Mended and mending, he held a letter sealed in the Lord's sweet red wax. He did not look inside. He might have been turned to salt if he had. "For Liora of Darglan," he said, and his voice did not reveal whether the letter contained invitation, insult, or a clever fold that became both when you turned it. "I have dough on my hands," I said. He did not offer to hold the letter for me. Toll wiped mine with a flour sack, unnecessarily tender, and I broke the seal with Guest's careful tip. The note smelled faintly of thorn sugar. The script was trained to look effortless. "Liora, you will forgive me. I devoured the room you were building once, in another century, when it belonged to someone with your stubborn, and I regretted it almost immediately. I am a creature of appetite, even for regret. I am told you are clever with refusals. Refuse to be predictable. Come to my winter gallery at moonrise. Bring your knife, bring your boy, bring your king, if he can be spared. Do not bring bread. Briar. P.S. This is not a trap designed to kill you. It is a trap designed to make you choose a kind of hunger. I am trying to be honest. It is new to me. Do not reward me for it with pity. My mouth tasted of old apple skins and frost and North Bog memory." I passed the note to Kael. He read it with his gaze narrow, as if he could make words bleed the truth they concealed. Soraya breathed out haughtily. "He invites you to a room he owns and tells you not to bring the only God who answers to your hands. He has chosen the battlefield." "Between," I said, "we can make one wherever we stand." Toll muttered, "Do not bring bread," and the ink on his palm trembled, wanting to argue. Julian touched his ribbon. His eyes found mine, not like a child's asking permission, but like a comrade's, measuring dangers. If I go, he will try to pluck me like a harp in front of everyone. If I don't, he will tell them I am afraid. He will be right either way. "We can bind the room to us," I said, a thought arriving with the sound of a moth's wing. "Not its walls, its rule. Keep and carry. The way women carry the saint of lost needles in their sewing baskets. A story you bring where you need it." Kael looked at me, a quiet heat under his gaze. Neither king nor monster in that blink, only a man generous enough to be moved. "Build it in your mouth," he said. "Name it into the air and call us there." "And I won't name it until it forgives me," I said, and his mouth tipped. "Good," Soraya said. "At least one of us is cautious." "Caution isn't holy," I said, "but it keeps you alive long enough to build holiness." When the light slanted thinner, we washed our hands. We left loaves for those who would come behind us and find the room warm. I put Guest under my belt, and the coin mirror I had refused into my pocket. Refusals are most useful when you can carry them into the hour after. Kael did not put on a crown. He looked at it on a stand and left it like a dangerous toy a child had been warned off. Julian tied his ribbon not tight, not loose, the way a sailor ties a rope he will cut at the first cry. We went the winter way. Briar's gallery was what it said. An art of cold. The floor remembered ice, even when it had none. The paintings on the walls were not paintings so much as bruises the room had learned to display. You could see where cruelty had been practiced and smoothed into a myth. He was there, of course, laid back in a chair like a man who knew the wood would never dare splinter under him. 4 courtiers to a corner, each chosen for a different kind of sharp. A laugh, a shoulder, a ringed hand, a look. "You brought bread," he said, because of course the smell had followed us like a small, sincere dog. He sniffed it as a man might sniff a rival's skin. "Naughty." "This is not bread," I said, and held nothing in my hands. "This is the idea of being permitted to be human." Briar's eyes flashed once with something like delight. "I should have been born a century later," he said to Soraya, who had taken position at Kael's left, uninvited and immovable. Then I might have enjoyed trouble rather than authoring it. "You are still writing," she said coolly. "Some of us are learning to read." Briar did not take offense. He looked at Julian, longer, letting the look do its trick. He had the precision of a knife that did not need to move to cut. He had cut whole days out of people this way without lifting a hand. "Take off your ribbon," he said softly, as if offering a pillow. Julian lifted his chin. He did not touch the ribbon. "Say my name first," he said. "If you know it, you may ask." Briar smiled. "Names are for men who own small rooms." "Then you will not be let into mine," Julian said. The gallery stilled. Briar did not like locks he could not pick with a smirk. The ringed-handed courtier unfolded her fan and refolded it with moderate disappointment. "I am not here to steal your boy," Briar said carelessly, as if the desire beneath his words had not been a demon setting the table all day. "He can come to me when he is hungry. I am here for the king's hunger." "And what is that?" Kael asked, without any attempt to cheapen the question into wit. "To be forgiven," Briar said, in a tone of such bored kindness that a lesser person might have thanked him for being cruel in velvet. "And to have someone to blame when he's not. What a feast! Pity, roasted with responsibility, garlic of shame." He leaned forward and, with 2 fingers, picked something invisible off the arm of his chair, the gesture he had offered Julian earlier, now at me. Guest warmed at my hip. "And you, Liora of the Between, what do you hunger for? To be singular? To be necessary? To be the one woman who could hold a river and a king between her teeth and call it kiss? It must be tiring. Being exceptional is just a prettier noose." "You're trying to sell me a different one," I said, and did not look away. Buckled with envy, lined with compliments, fitted in a winter gallery by a man who thinks regret is a spice. He laughed. It was honest and it hurt. "Fine. Bond with your bread. Build your room. It will seem like a church until someone tries to bring a wolf in. And the wolf will be me, and I will be so beautiful, and your knife will be so sure. And then we will do the old dance. My teeth, your refusal, his crown, the river's thirst. The moon will oblige us by remaining hollow so the light can dramatize our cheekbones." "Is there a reason we came?" Soraya said to him. "The long-suffering that only the ferociously loyal can fully own. Or was it to hear yourself refuse to change?" He tapped his fingers on the chair, each a little drum. "There is always a reason. We have habits, Seneschal, and if we are to break them tonight, we must first name them." He rose, and the gallery felt it, admitting he had weight. He flicked his ring, and the air rang. What came in answer was not a creature, not in the way we tell children stories of wolves and bears and wolves as men. It was a habit made beast. It looked like hunger when hunger becomes religion. It had antlers of written rules and a hide stitched with reviews. It had a mouth that said, "Everything you are will only matter to me if I can eat it." It was older than Briar and younger than me. It was the thing the court knelt to when it wanted to feel virtuous about eating its own. Soria pulled a knife out of nowhere. Hers had sterile lines, like a scalpel that performed metaphors at a hospital for reputations. Toll did not try to stab anything. He reached for his pen. The courtiers fell back, making a stage of absence. "Do not strike at what I summon," Briar said to me, and his voice cracked 1 millimeter, which told me a great deal. "You will think it's me. It is not. It is us." "Good," I said. "Then we will starve it." Guest lifted in my hand before I knew I had decided. The habit beast turned its attention toward the small room in my mouth, the one with no crown, the one I had not named aloud. It smelled the bread we had baked there and drooled a gospel. No, I told it, and this time the word had edges I had earned needing. No, I told it again, with the weight of a woman who had stood where other people could count her and then stepped out of their columns. No, I told it a third time, for the lily I had not chosen, for the key I hadn't taken. It charged, not with hooves, but with a cascade of examples, statues, banners, girls turned into speeches, boys bound into warnings, kings made into fathers to forgive us when our gods were unavailable. It threw them at me. They broke on the floor like pretty plates. The hunger that held them together reached with its real mouth toward Julian's ribbon and Kael's hands and the unspoken shape of my name. Guest moved, not as a blade moves, but as a door shuts. "What will you cut?" the habit beast asked inside my head, in the voice of everyone who has ever asked a woman to be reasonable. "If you slice me out, you slice out your own clever place. The court will go starving. Men will not love you with their mouth open. The moon will grow back its missing. I will cut the appetite," I said, "not hunger. Hunger is honest. Appetite is the poem we tell to make theft seem devout." Guest hummed. I felt the air near my shoulder lighten, as if an old hand had lifted. I cut not the beast's throat, not its antlers. I cut the invisible cords between its ribs and the people who fed it on their worst days. I cut the line from Briar's mouth to its jaw, neat as snipping an embroidery thread so the wrong color stops leaking through. I cut the story that said a boy could be made into an object lesson and be grateful for the attention. I cut the line that ran from my own heart to the part of me that wanted, shamefully, to be the most necessary woman in any room. The beast bellowed, but not loudly. The sound was the sigh of an audience when the play ends and they are not sure whether to clap. It stumbled. Julian's hand went to his ribbon and found it suddenly only cloth, not covenant. Soraya's knife lowered, the sterility gone. She looked at it as if it had become a kitchen thing, useful but not ambitious. Toll's pen moved, quick, drawing the curve of something loosening. Briar's face changed. For a trembling moment he looked like a boy at a river he had been warned against, who stepped in anyway and did not die. Then, because men like him are careful about what they let you keep of them, he smiled again, thin and almost kind. "Very good," he said. "You have killed my party trick." He sat slowly, as if translating the action back into his bones. "Now, what will you eat when you need to feel full? And all must end. Itself of Lo's day." "Bread," Kael said, and it should have been laughable. A king with flour on his tongue, but it was not. And what we make together when we do not have to be special to be safe. "Ah," Briar breathed, and for one breath respected him. "Communion. You reinvent religion and put it in the oven. You're dangerous." "Less than the old things," I said, "but enough." The habit beast staggered toward the far end of the gallery, where a mirror hung one of Briar's bruised paintings, pretending to be a window. It put its face to the glass and licked, and the glass did not show it teeth. It showed it boredom. The beast sobbed like a faraway train. "Go on," I said to it, and to the court, and to myself, and to a boy in my village who wanted to survive his nights. "Get out." It did. It always does when there is nothing to eat. It went to find a place where people did not know they could feed it less. We stood in the quiet that follows a practice you thought you had memorized and find you can do differently. I folded Guest to my side and felt the knife settle like a guest who, having finished the story that got them invited, now consented to wash up. Julian took a breath that did not scrape. He put his fingers under the ribbon and lifted. It came away easy. He held it like a shed skin and smiled, not small or sly, but new. The bruise beneath was not bruise now, only the skin of a boy who had been too carefully handled. "You may keep it," he said to Soraya, offering the ribbon. She took it and tied it around her wrist, a humorless bracelet that did not look like worship. She has always kept time. Now she wore a reminder that time can soften. Briar watched us all as if counting new species. "You will break this court," he said conversationally. "Not with war, with windows. I find I am not bored." He stood. "Do not mistake me for your ally, but consider me entertained." "You could help," Kael said. "I could," Briar allowed, "if you can make a room in which I can live without starving other people to keep my blood sweet. I have not seen such a room, but this is the first time I have smelled one." "Come hungry," I said. "We will give you bad bread until you learn what good is." He laughed again, less painfully. "Leave before I like you." We did. Not triumphant, which is a costume, but lighter, which is an honest condition. In the corridor, the smell of our room waited like a hound on a porch. We went back to it and fed the people who had, from curiosity or courage or simple appetite for warmth, found their way to our door. The third batch was better, the fourth worse, reminding us that progress is not a staircase, but a field that floods and dries and floods again. The river woman came in the steam, not as a body, but as an arrival. A hush in the room that was not fear, and a wetness on every eye that did not belong to sorrow. I broke a heel of crust and set it on the sill. It vanished. The window glass fogged with the shape of a lily, opening. "Tomorrow," Kael said, his voice low as a vow he did not intend to tangle, "the court will convene to decide we did not do what we did." "We will do it again," I said, "from shorter and truer." He turned his hands palm up on the table and did not quite touch mine. "Liora," he said, and I am ashamed of how the syllables glowed where they struck. "There is a thing I have not offered you, because I am afraid to find out whether I am the man who offers it as a key or as a knife." "Say it anyway," I said, not kind, but not cruel. "A name," he said quietly. "Not yours, not mine, ours. Names are rooms too. I want one that we can set down and pick up when we need to remember the person the other becomes in the dark." I thought of the coin mirror in my pocket. It had remained sulky all afternoon. It did not want to show faces. It wanted to show wounds and call it revelation. I took it out and set it on the table between us. The mirror reflected nothing until the bread steam sullied it and then wiped it clean. When the sheen returned, I saw not my face nor his, but the small square we occupied, flower-dusted and brave. "This," I said, tapping the mirror, "is the wrong tool for our room." He breathed. Something in his shoulders unhooked. "Then what is the right one?" "A window," I said. "That can be opened and shut when storms come." We did not touch. Not then. We put our hands on the same bowl and turned the dough. The intimacy was the truer for its lack of spectacle. If I loved him, and there it was, the knife that could also be a key, then it was not as a sovereign or a story, but as a man who, under a bad moon, had learned to keep his hands warm by baking bread badly. Night came the way it always does, with rooms asking whether you mean to keep your faith as honestly as you kept it at noon. The court sang to itself melancholy as after-feast music. Soraya took her lists to bed with flour on the corner of one page. Toll fell asleep sitting up, ink drying on his fingers in the shape of the word bread. Julian lay on the floor beneath the table, like a fox that trusts the feet above it, and dreamed without his hands clawing his chest. I slept, and yes, I dreamed, and yes, the river came. She was rain. This time, not woman. She came in past the window the way a lover does who knows the latch, and she kissed every surface until the room smelled like answer. I did not speak my name. I would not. She did not ask for it. She said instead, "You have built a mouth." I thought I was building a room, I said, looking at the door, which had become a question mark and then a yes. A room is a mouth in which a house pronounces its intention, she said. You will take this one with you. You will put it down by the river's edge when you are ready, and I will decide if my teeth are tired enough to stop grinding old bones. Only any Steve. Your marriage, I said, to the king who carved canyons. His name has been law so long it thinks it is a weather, she said, not unkindly, which is a new kind of cruelty when you deserved it. I married him because he knew how to make promises. You are dangerous because you know how to break them. I know how to keep different ones, I said. Come eat with us. She did not nod. She poured herself across the sill and was gone. Morning set its foot upon the court. Soraya's bell was not a bell, but it did the same thing. In the great hall, the court gathered, looking like people who had been forced to dance with a cousin they despised and were trying to make politeness an art. The throne sat like a problem someone had carved a chair into. We did not wait for Kael to call us to attention. I set a basket of bread on the floor in the center and put the coin mirror beside it. Here, I said, 2 religions. Choose. A hiss, a laughter, a murmur, the sound an audience makes when it wants to riot, but also wants not to be shown the exits. Briar did not touch either. He stood with his hands behind his back, like a man properly punished, divided by pleasingly bruised, and looked at the bread with an indulgence that was not hateful. Toll picked up the mirror, and then set it down, and then picked up the bread. Soraya walked around the basket once, twice, and then stopped where the light made a stripe she could stand on as if it were a beam. Julian sat on the step of the dais as if he had always belonged on steps and nowhere else. Kael did not sit. He came down into the room and unbuttoned the idea of himself as a king. It wasn't a gesture you could see, except that people breathed more easily when he made it. This is what we will do, he said, to his enemies and to the pillars and to the moths privy to everything. We will keep the old laws where they keep us decent. We will break the ones that keep us clever at the cost of being kind. We will build rooms that make us hungry for the sort of bread that does not require someone else to starve. You cannot legislate appetite, someone objected, voicing the god of loopholes. No, Kael said, but I can invite you to a table. You will be weak, another spat. The river will drown you. Perhaps, Kael said, but if I drown, I will drown in a place where someone has set out butter for the ghosts. Soraya stepped forward. We announce a right, she said. She nodded at me as if assigning a task I had already performed. The room between will be established by the river bank, half in and half out, where mouths meet. Those who enter set down their names. When they leave, the names go with them or do not, as they choose. No decisions made within will be turned into tactics outside, Accept the decision to feed those who are hungry. We will become unskilled at devouring each other. It will feel like deprivation until it feels like practice. Who presides? Lord Briar asked, full of a dangerous curiosity. Presiding is what ruined this place, Toll said, surprising himself again with his own voice. We will facilitate, and when we fail to do it beautifully, we will ask for help. I looked up at the hollow moon. It had not healed. It would not. That was never the point. Holes are where the light goes in, Aunt Magda might have said, with a wink she saved for when wisdom threatened to become ornamental. Kael took from his sleeve a small thing wrapped in cloth. He unfolded it, and I saw the key I had refused, and not the same. It was no longer pearl-frosted, no longer eager to show me a door I had not asked to see. It was iron and ordinary and warm. He set it on the floor by the basket of bread. This, he said to the room and to me, is not a key I will drink or bury. It belongs to the door of the room we will build. It has two faces, and neither is mine alone. My lungs remembered something they had not done since childhood. They let air all the way in. I knelt and picked up the key. It did not sing. It did not seduce. It lay in my palm like a tool so humble even the gods could not bother with it. I wanted to kiss it. I did not, because kissing keys in front of courts is a habit I do not wish my children to inherit. Between, I said for the first time with the weight of naming, and the word became a small architecture in the hall. No walls, only a table, only a window, only a rule. You are safe enough to set yourself down. Between, echoed Julian, and his voice put rafters on it. Between, said Soria, grudging as a woman who will love this and hate herself for how late she is to it. Between, Kael said, and it sounded like a man setting his crown on the table and not picking it back up right away. Briar did not say it. He did not have to. He was already looking at the doorway, as if calculating how not to break it when he entered. We went to the river with hammers and nails and too much hope. The river rose to meet us, obstinate, as any ancient thing asked to forgive those who had made a habit of asking forgiveness instead of changing. The lily bridge arced her boned syllables above our heads, while we staked our poor posts and swore at bad angles. Children from the village came, bright-mouthed and wide-eyed, and asking if we were making a new saint. Aunt Magda came and scolded me with arms, which is the only way to scold a girl building a place the world has told her is not possible. Men with poor hands came and learned their hands were not poor. Women with lists came and lost their lists in the wind and learned to hold rope. Toll wrote nothing down. His pen watched and forgave him. Soria measured the shadow. Time agreed. Julian tied and untied, until every knot was one he had taught himself. Kael carried wood like a man who had learned to carry more ghosts than grain, and had not known until now that a board could be lighter for being honest. We raised a skeleton. We raised a roof. We argued about windows, then left more than we needed and called it mercy. We hung a door not to lock, but to announce. We painted nothing. We hung no tapestries woven from anyone's grief. We set a table and burned the first loaf in it. We laughed and set out butter anyway. When the sun chose to give up on us and the hollow moon took over, the river tested the posts with a sly push. The room swayed and did not fall. We are open, I said to the night, and the court and the lilies and the moth at my throat and the woman in the water and the child in the village and the habit beast that would ever come back hungry and the man beside me. They came, not all at once, and not all of them People came who had grievances and left with recipes for speaking them without turning them into weapons. People came who thought they could ruin us with elegance and found that a wobbly table is kinder than a perfect chair. People came who were empty where love should have been and were filled with soup and sent away with bread for breakfast. People came who had names too sharp to hold and learned to put them down like knives at the edge of plates and eat with their hands. We were stupid and resentful and pretended we were saints. When we realized it, we laughed at ourselves and then did better. We failed, forgiven, and failed again. Forgiven. The river watched with the patience of weather. She lapped the threshold like a cat drinking from a puddle after rain. Once, twice, thrice, she put a lily in the doorway. We took them in and set them in a bowl because beauty needs a small home, or it will eat your big one. Lady Soria came one night very late and leaned her forehead against the doorframe as a penitent does against a cold stone. She stayed there so long we did not know whether to touch her. Finally, she touched the key hung on its nail beside her, and the key softened, and her shoulders softened, and time forgave her just enough to let her sleep. Lord Briar came too, as all dangerous men must, if only to test the edge of the room. He stood, glittering even without light, and saw that no one turned to look at him except to offer him a bowl. He ate, suspicious as a cat, meeting an honestly rough hand. He brought his children the grievances he loved, and let them under the table, where they whined in the language of appetite, and fell asleep on warm feet. He did not starve, he did not feed them. He watched them dream and did not cry, because he had not bought the right tears for the occasion. I forgave him that. He left bread on the sill, a clumsy apology, and I did not insult him by naming it out loud. Toll wrote a law that said no law written in the room between could be used as a cudgel outside of it. The court grudged, then realized it felt lighter for the loss of that particular weapon, like a man who doesn't know until the belt unbuckles that he has been holding his breath for years. Julian did a thing one afternoon that made me love him with the particular ache you feel for younger creatures who run faster once the thorn is out of their paw. He went into the room wearing no ribbon. He tied one end of it to the key. He tied the other round his wrist loosely, then tighter, then loosened it again, then took it off and set it on the table. He walked out. He came back. He took it. He tied it. He took it off. He laughed. He cried a little. He put the ribbon in the flour jar, where it would be safe if he wanted it later. My chest hurt from the beauty of it. Kael watched and put his hand on the table as if to keep from reaching. He is learning. I did not speak my true name. Not to the room, not to the river, not to Kael. It sat between my teeth like a seed deciding what season to be. One night, I dreamed of the kitchen again, and the river woman tilted her head as if listening to a ground I could not hear. "You have not answered," she said. "I am not refusing," I said. "I am ripening." "Do not let him rot," she said, not unkindly. "I won't," I said, and woke with my palm under Kael's hand on the table and the imprint of grain in our skins. When I did speak my name, it came not with thunder. It came during an argument about whether windows should be latched when the storms rise. Soraya wanted them shut against the schedule. Toll wanted them open to the unexpected. Briar wanted them stained so the light would always flatter. Julian was holding two pieces of wood at war with each other. I said the name into the hinge as I installed it. The hinge took it like oil. The window moved perfectly thereafter, opening and closing without drama. The room kept it. The court did not receive it. The river heard and did not drink. Kael's eyes lifted, yes. He felt it, but he did not ask, because he has learned keys. And what of Kael and his kingship? We built a place where his crown could come and go without bruising us. More nights than not, he left it hooked on a nail by the far door like a coat. More mornings than not, he forgot to put it back on until a courtier reminded him with a cough that had survived 3 regimes. He did not abdicate. This is not that story. He ruled less efficiently and more wisely. The court learned how much of its time had been eaten by its own appetite. The lilies in the river did not stop choosing. There is still a tithe, because power remembers to be hungry even when you feed it with something better. But the lilies that touched ankles now sometimes guided feet to our threshold first. And the women and men and those who do not go by those words came in and set their names down and learned how to carry them out again with fewer teeth marks. On the last day of the first season of The Room Between, the hollow moon hung lower than I had ever seen it, as if peering in to judge whether it could trust us with our own breathed vows. I baked bread with the stranger's syllable under my tongue and did not choke. The room was full without being crowded. That is another law we made. Full does not mean everyone at once. It means enough. The river came, and this time she wore a body again. The woman with hair that had learned the patience of falling. The eyes, the color of the place you find when you stop thinking. The mouth that had smiled like a cut, and now like a seam that had learned the art of mending from the inside. "You fed me," she said, as if surprised to be a creature required to admit such a thing. "I ate. I am not empty. It is bad bread," I warned. "It is honest," she said. "It tastes like windows. It no his." Soria set a bowl near her elbow without looking at the small miracle she was committing. Toll wrote nothing. Briar watched like a man who has spent his life throwing knives and was curious what it felt like to catch one without dying. Julian stood in the doorway with his ribbon in his pocket and his throat clear and his eyes full, and did not need to be taught where to stand. Kael sat with his back to the door, which is how you show trust in places like this, and he turned toward me with a privacy in his eyes that rooms like this were invented to protect. "Liora," he said, not like a summons, like the answer to one. "Will you marry me?" The room listened and did not lean. The court, some present, some absent, breathed carefully so as not to topple anything. The river, who had been a bride in a century that taught men how to drown with promises, regarded me with a patience I had not yet earned. "Not to a crown," I said. "Not to a court. Not even to the man you make of yourself in rooms where you don't need to be loved to be obeyed. To me," he said simply. And it was a trick and not a trick. Because what is a me that isn't a story we are willing to keep rewriting? I set my palm on the table between us. The skin there bore the work of a season. Flour, dust, small burns, a line where a knife had remembered and forgotten me. "I will not say yes in a hall," I said. "I will not say yes on a bridge made of debts. I will not say yes under a sky that eats its own light to make our cheekbones dramatic." "Then where?" he asked. "Not begging, not bargaining, which is rarer and harder?" "In a bad, perfect room," I said, "with the key on the wall and the windows open, and the river listening but not commanding, and the court invited but not presiding, and the bread either burned or not. In a room where we set our names down and pick them up when we remember whose mouths they fit." "That is here," he said. "It is," I said. "And also it is not yet." He were of files. I looked at the river woman, and she, grand in the ungrand way of rain, inclined her head 1 degree. You will wed in the between place, she said, between flood and famine, between habit and hunger, between knife and key. I will come without a crown. I will bring lilies and not name anyone with them. And I, Soraya said sharply, as if she had just caught herself promising something soft, will bring a list I will not read. Briar rolled his eyes, but not as a weapon. I will bring wine and try to be interesting. Bring yourself, I said. And leave hungry? Toll closed his eyes and, for the first time since I'd met him, wrote a sentence on paper rather than skin. It read, "We are tired of learning to love our enemies by becoming them. We did it at dawn a week later, because dawn is the only honest wedding light, the world climbing into itself without quite knowing whether it has the right. The hollow moon had moved. It was still bitten and would be, but the bite seemed less like an accusation and more like an old story the sky had decided not to tell at breakfast. Aunt Magda came and put rosemary in my hair and nettles in my shoes because love ought to sting enough to remind you which way to step. Julian stood with his palms on the table as if steadying it for a truth, and the ribbon lay coiled like a sleeping thing near the key. Soraya smuggled in a smile so small it might have been a mistake. Toll's pen waited, well-behaved. Briar leaned in a doorway, pretending not to care that he cared. The children from the village watched through the windows, learning the body language of vows that do not cage. Kael and I stood in the space we had made and said the ordinary words people have always said. We said them wrong and right. We said them with our hands more than our mouths. We put our crowns on the table and did not take them up when it was over. We cut bread with my knife and called it the most dangerous thing we had ever done. We set our names down and we did not pick them up for an hour, and we were not eaten by the room or by our enemies for it. The river lapped at the threshold. A lily drifted in and touched my ankle and did not speak my name. It faced upstream, then downstream, then toward the table, and opened. Inside lay nothing. Not a knife, not a key, not a mirror, just the hollow where those things might have been. "What is it?" Julian whispered, reverent. "Space," I said, "for what we will need later." The feast after was foolish and decent and ordinary, best words I know. We spilled and we swept. We argued about butter. We forgave without asking and apologized without witnesses. People came and went and came back. The habit beast snuffed at the window and, finding nothing to gorge on, went to whine at the palace kitchens where people who had not yet learned came to feed it their outrage. At noon, I stood with my husband, my man. The word husband belongs to a possession I do not need, and watched the river. She ran like a woman late to a joy she has given herself permission to claim. "What will you do when I fail you?" Kael asked. And there it was again, the humility that makes an altar out of nothing. "I will fail you back," I said, and he laughed the laugh of a man who knows what that means. "And then we will try again, and if we cannot, we will build a window, and if the window is not enough, we will open the door, and if the door breaks, we will stand in the rain and name it a kind of blessing." "Liora," he said. And yes, I answered, not the true name which is mine, but the sound people make to fetch me when they are hungry and not afraid of the small gods. I set bread on the sill for the river. She took it. I set bread in the road for the habit beast. It sniffed and sneezed and went looking for a different sermon. I set bread on the throne in the great hall. It looked less like a trap when it was being used as a table. The hollow moon, which had eaten its own heart and made a light of it, watched. It will always be wounded, so will we. The trick is not to worship the wound. The trick is to build rooms around it where, when people come in, they remember what mouths are for, besides saying no. If there is a moral, I despise it. Morals are mirrors that flatter the teller. If there is a promise, I like it better. That we will set the table again tomorrow, even if the bread burns and the knives forget our hands, and the keys seem suddenly like the easiest shape of obedience. We will do it badly, and then less badly. The lilies will turn and face nothing but the current, and perhaps us when we deserve it. The court will learn boredom with its old games. The river will go on being water wearing a woman because that is how she can be seen by people who would otherwise only measure her. And when my nephew asks, in the village that taught me how to be counted and to step out of columns, "Aunt, what is the hollow moon for?" I will say, to remind us where the light goes in and whose bread we owe. Guest hangs now where it ought, by the door, a tool, a story, a visitor who knows when to be silent. The coin mirror sits in a drawer, sometimes useful for checking if there is flour on my cheek, sometimes for showing me that sometimes a wound is just a thing that happened and not a destiny. The key hangs on its nail, worn by many hands already, two-faced and honest. The room breathes, the court sulks and adapts, the river sends rain when she feels like dancing, the lilies drift and choose and fail and try again. I keep my name. I keep my husband's hand on the bowl when the dough is heavy. I keep my nephew's night terrors on a string and lead them outside to pee in the dark where they cannot find the door back in. I keep a seat for Lord Briar because sometimes, may we be forgiven, our enemies are the only ones who know how to describe the monster we have invited. I keep an hour every morning for nothing at all, because nothing at all is where the gods hide when the clever men start to legislate them. This is how we do it. Not with crowns, not with tithes, not with knives that think they are kings. With rooms and bread and names we are not afraid to set down because we trust each other to guard them from the wind. With a river that could not be drowned, with a moon that remembers you can still be holy when something has bitten you and you did not bite back. And when I lie down at night, the moth in my throat pauses its patient wing and sleeps, at last, against a door it knows will open in the morning.